Begin today the Gemara on the bottom of Daf Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis, 8-9 lines from the bottom of the Yamud. We was discussing here the Yidden passing through the Yarden because we spoke in the Mishnah about the brachas and the klolas that the Yidden heard on Har Grizim and Har Evel. There was a discussion where exactly that is. Is it near the Yarden? Is it distant from the Yarden? So in connection to this, the Gemara brings another brayso that discusses the miracles that occurred when the Yidden passed through the Yarden. Tana Rabbanon, we learned in the brayso, Keitzad Ovri Yisrael es Yarden. How did the Yidden cross the Yarden? Chol Yom, every day when the Yidden traveled in the Midbar, Arayin Neiseya Achash Nei Degolim. The Arayin would travel, but that's the Arayin with the Mishkan. They would travel behind two of the Shvatim. Shevet Yehuda was the first one that went. There were 4 flags, right? Klal Yisrael was divided into 4 different machnes, 4 different flags. First Machne Yehuda went, then afterwards Machne Ruvain, and only afterwards went the Arayin. But V'hayayim, today, when the Yidden crossed the Yarden, Nasa Tchila. The Arayin went first, and the waters of the Yarden moved to the side, as we'll see soon, and allowed for Yidden to pass through the Arayin going first. Shenem, as the pasuk describes, Hine Arayin Bris Hashem Adain Kol Haaretz. The Arayin, the Eibishter, the master of the whole world, goes ahead in front of you. That's the pasuk. So here we see that it went in front of the Yidden. Now another detail that was different here, all the time when Yidden were traveling in the Midbar, who carried the Arayin? Leviim. Leviim, Neisan the Arayin. The Leviim, specifically Kahas from Shevet Levi, they had the job to carry the Arayin. But over here, on this day, the Kainim were the ones that carried the Arayin. Shenem, as the pasuk there describes, when the Kainim placed their feet into the Yarden, what happened was the water stopped flowing its regular flow, and Yidden were able to pass through. So we see the Kainim are the ones that carried it. Further, we learned in the brayso, Tanya Rabbi Yosi Yomer. Rabbi Yosi says, B'shloisha mekaymes. There were actually 3 times that Nasu Kainim is Arin, that the Kainim carried the Arin. Geshavra say Yarden, like we just said, when the Yidden passed through the Yarden. And also, Ukeshe Sivu es Yerichai, when Yidden were around the city of Yerichai, and the whole story that the Yidden conquered Yerichai, that went around the city of Yerichai with the Arayin, and what happened was the walls of the city fell down. That was also the Kainim carried the Arayin. And also, Keshechziru lemekaymai, when the Arayin was brought into the Beis HaMikdash, into the first Beis HaMikdash, it was also brought through the Kainim. So Rashi here brings a story that happened that the Plishtim had stolen the Arayin from the Mishkan Shilai, and then for a long time, the Arayin was placed in the different houses. Rashi here brings, it was placed first in the house of Avinadav, and then from there it went to another place, to the house of Ovid Edom for many, many years, because David HaMelech did not build a Beis HaMikdash. But then when Shlomo Melech finally built a Beis HaMikdash, so then it was brought into the Beis HaMikdash, into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Who brought it? Who carried the Arayin? It wasn't the Leviim. The Kainim carried the Arayin and brought it into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Okay, now returning back to the story that happened when the Yidden crossed the Yarden. The Kiven Shenitbalu Ragle Kainim B'mayim. As soon as the Kainim put their feet that is into the water of the Yarden, what happened? Chozru Hamayim Lachereyim. The water stopped in its tracks. It didn't continue flowing down or downstream as it always flows. So Lachereyim over here doesn't literally mean that the water began flowing in the other direction. It just means that the water sort of stayed in that place. The water came to that point and it stopped right there. And the water kept on just piling up. It kept on piling up higher and higher and higher because it didn't continue flowing downstream. Shenem, as it says, the Kavoi Noisei Aron Ada Yarden, the ones that carried the Aron came to the Yarden. Vayamdu Hamayim Hayardim Ulmaila, and the water that was flowing down from up the stream coming down, it stopped. Kamoi Nei Dechad, Kamu Nei Dechad, and it created this wall. The water went higher and higher, creating this wall of water and allowing the Yidden to pass through. The Kama Goivon Shamayim. How tall did the water go in its height when it gathered together there in that area and it wasn't flowing down? Shnei Masa Mil al Shnei Masa Mil, 12 mil by 12 mil, Keneged Machne Yisrael. the same size of the Yidden that passed through. The Yidden that passed through, when the Yidden would dwell in the Midbar, when the Yidden were resting, camping in the Midbar, the size of the Machna of all the entire Klal Yisrael was 12 mil by 12 mil. So Yidden passed through also in the same exact formation, and therefore the same distance of all the Yidden traveling through is the distance of how high that water kept on going higher and higher to that height of 12 mil. In the Lashon,
the size of a mill?
Size of a mill, I don't know, maybe they bring it there, I'm not sure. Okay, so Rashi over here, it looks like is actually not good. This Lashon that we have here in the Gemara, 12 mil by 12 mil, but the Lashon of Rashi over here is Yud Beis mil keneged Machne Yisrael, because we're not talking over here about the width, we're only talking about the length of the Yidden walking through. The Yidden walk through, so there's the length and the width as well. But here we're talking about the length of the Yidden walking through, which is Yud Beis Mil, and that's how high the water climbs and creates this tremendous wall. Rabbi Yehuda. This is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Amalei Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Shimon asks him on this. Lid varecha. But now, according to your words, now ask yourself: Adam Kal is a person that walks. Is he easier and quicker to walk? Mayim kalam, or do waters flow quicker than a person? Have a yomer. So of course the answer is Mayim kalam. Water that flows down a stream, the water flows much quicker than a person walks. If so, the question is, what are you saying? That the water went only up to that height of 12 mil, which is the same size of the whole Klal Yisrael that walks through. But since water flows much quicker, it'll take much quicker for the water to reach that height of 12 mil than the Yidden walking through. In Cain, if so, according to you, before the Yidden, which are walking on a slower pace than the flow of the water, get out of the Yarden, so the water only rises to that level, and then it's going to come and wash them out. It's going to go fall back down on them. So therefore, he argues. Rabbi Elazar Rav Shimon says, Ella rather Malamed. What this teaches us is this pasuk here that says Kamu Neid Echad, that it went up and it rose like a wall. It teaches us Shahayu Mayim Nidgoshin Va'oilin Kipin Al Gabe Kipin. The water was piling up like kipin on top of kipin, which is arches on top of arches. It went higher and higher. Yeser Misholish Meis Mil, higher than 300 mil. And this was extremely high. Taisus over here says it went up, it went high into this above the clouds. And all the kings from the east and the west, all around, all saw this water that piled up for the Yidden to pass through. Shenem, as the pasuk says, "Vayihi kishmoya kol malchia moiriya shebeva yadin yomo," the ones that were on the Yoma. Yoma is the west. And all the kings of Canaan, they're on the east. Asher alayam, as Asher Hayvish Hashem Esmei Yarden. They should dried up the Yarden with Bnei Yisrael for the Yidden ad Ovram, in order for them to pass through. Vayimas lavavam, and their heart melted. Behem oid ruach. They had no spirit in them to fight the Yidden. Bnei Yisrael, because the Yidden had passed through. And Af Rachav Azayna, the Brai said. Rachav Azayna. This was years later when the Yidden went. They sent Meraglim to go and spy how to come and conquer Eretz Yisrael, and they stayed by this woman that was a Zaina, and her name was Rachav. Amra l'shluchi Yeshua. She said to the shluchim of Yeshua years later. She said this: Kishamaynu es hashahavish Hashem es me Yamsuf v'goyim. We remember this that the Eibush should dry it up the Yamsuf. And then also it says over there in the continuation of the pasuk, not only Havish Hashem es me Yamsuf, but also Benegay to the Yarden as well. They heard the Vanishma Vayimas Levavenu Velekama Eid V'Gaimer. They heard this, that the Eibishter dried up the Yarden. Ashabeva Yarden. It says over there also that what the Eibishter has done for the Yidden to come through the Yarden to come into Eretz Yisrael. So because it went up 300 mil in its height, that's how everybody around saw this tremendous nest that happened to Yidden to pass through the Yarden. Okay, but we have here a machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Shimon, how high it went up for Yidden to pass through. The Gemara is going to return to that machlokes soon, but first the Gemara discusses what happened while the Yidden was still in the Yarden. Oidam b'Yarden, the Yidden was still there in the Yarden crossing through. Amalem Yeshua tells the Yidden, Du'u alma atem oivrim Yarden. You have to know why you're passing through the Yarden into Eretz Yisrael. It's with the condition that you accept upon yourself now to get rid and to expel all those that are living in the land now. Point is not that Eden should go into the land and live amongst the Goyim and go in their ways. No, the point is to get rid of them. That you will expel all the Goyim living in Eretz Yisrael. If you will do this, if you accept upon yourself not to do this mutav, then good. Then lav. If you don't accept this upon yourself, the water will come and will drown all of you. But it says oiseichem. It doesn't say oischem, it says oiseichem. What does oiseichem mean? My oiseichem, oisi ve'eschem. The water will come and wash away me and you together over here in the Yarden. Another thing Yeshua has told them, oidem be'Yarden, when they were still in the Yarden. Amalem Yeshua told the Yidden, harimu lechem ish oven achas al shichmai, lemispar shifte Yisrael v'gayme. Yeshua designated one Yid from each one of the 12 Shvatim, and he told each one of them, take a rock out of the Yarden and place it over there in the Yarden in one place, sort of to create a monument, to create a place where everyone will see these tall, big rocks there, that it should be remembered for the future, that everyone will know that spot, that area, what are these rocks doing here, to remind of the miracle that happened. Ksiv, the pasuk says, "Laman tiyeh zeis eis bekirбechem." This will be a sign amongst you. Ki yishalom b'nechem machalem ma avanim eila lechem v'gayim. What are these large rocks doing here in this place? Simin lebanim shavra avis Yarden. This is a sign for your children that your ancestors crossed the Yarden here in this area. So they placed it over there in the Yarden, or by the edge of the Yarden, for everyone to see this place. Now another thing, Oidam be'Yarden, when the Yidden was still in the Yarden, Amalem Yeshua told the Yidden, Sulechem mizeh mitoich ha'Yarden mimatzev ragle ha'koyanim hochein. You should carry out from the Yarden, from the place where the feet of the Koyanim were standing over there in the Yarden. This is prepared for you over here. Shteim esrei avonim, another 12 large rocks, besides these 12 large rocks that they put there as sort of a monument to remember the miracle that happened. Take another 12 rocks. Va'avartem oisam imochem. Take it out of the Yarden, carry it out of the Yarden together with you, and bring it with you in the place, in the hotel, so to speak. That's the literal translation of Malin, but it means in your place where you're going to sleep tonight. And you should bring it over there and bring these rocks out of the Yarden, bring it along with you. Yachal b'chol malin malin. You would think that they had to take it along with them in every place that they slept. Talmud Laima, Ashatalinu Bayalayla. Bring it to the place where you're going to sleep tonight. And where's the first place Yidden came to after they crossed the Yarden? They came to the Gilgal, a place called Gilgal, and that's where they put these rocks. Okay, these are the rocks that the Gemara actually spoke about before, that the Yidden actually later took it to Har Eval, and that's what they wrote the Sefer Torah. They wrote the entire Sefer Torah on it, and then translated it into 70 languages. So now, these rocks that the Yidden took out of the Yarden, how large were they? How heavy were they? Amr Rabbi Yehuda, Abba Chalafta, Rabbi Eliezer ben Masya, ben Chananya ben Chachinoi. These three Tanoim, Omdu al Oisan Avonim, they stood over there by those rocks, and Vishirim, and they measured their size, Kol Achas Va'achas Shkula Ka'arboim Sa. Each one of these rocks have the weight of 40 Sa. So what does it mean, the weight of 40 Sa? 40 Sa, it doesn't really apply to a weight. 40 Sa means a certain size. But apparently it means that these rocks were the size, just like a mikveh, which is made of 40 Sa. How do you get the water that's 40 Sa? So the Gemara always tells us that it's 3 amas height by an amma and an amma. So apparently these rocks were this size of 40 Sa, and that's the kind of weight that these rocks had. And the Yidden, each one of the Yidden carried, of each Shvatim that is, 12 of the Shvatim, carried one rock of this weight of 40 Sa. Now, Gemiri, we have a tradition, the Tu'una, the Midli Inchi, the Kasfe, the weight that a person can carry on his shoulders alone, is Tilsa, the Tu'una Have, is a third of the weight of the load that he can carry when he has help of another person helping him. And so over here, they were each able to carry on their own 40 sa'ah of this rack, the weight of this rack. So too, so what do you understand from that? If they have help from someone else, each one is able to carry 120 sa'ah of weight on their shoulders. So now we can, from here, at the mechashav le'eshkal, we can make a calculation regarding the grapes, the eshkal of grapes, that the Yidden carried out of Eretz Yisrael. This is the Meraglim, when they brought back the grapes to show the Yidden that what's growing in Eretz Yisrael, What was the weight? What was the weight that the Meraglim carried? Over here, the Meraglim did not carry these grapes alone. They carried it supporting one another. So each one has the ability to carry weight of 120 sa'ah of load. So what is that in Shanamar? Now, what does the pasuk describe regarding these grapes that they carried? V'yisa'uhu b'moit b'shnayim. They carried it with poles, and then the pasuk says b'shnayim, with two. Now the question is, why does it say two? If it says that they carried with a pole, would I not know that two people are carrying the pole? When you have a pole, there's two ends of the pole, so two people carry the pole. Why does the pasuk have to say b'shnayim, two people are carrying it? What does it mean when it says two? B'shnei moitis. It means that there were two poles that were being carried. So that's why it says b'shnayim. But here, on this, the Gemara says that you have to say that when it says b'moit b'shnayim, that was just one layer. But then there was another two poles as well. And the Gemara here explains this. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak says about the load of the grapes that the Meraglim carried, turtini. There was one load that they carried, and that's what's described in the pasuk, b'moit b'shnayim, that there were two poles that were carrying the load of the grapes. But also the turtini, there was another load below it that was carrying the load above it. That's what turtini means. One load that is supporting the other load of grapes. Okay, what does that mean? So when you have two poles and you hold those two poles and there are four people that are carrying these two poles, then you place another two poles below these two poles. So the bottom two poles that are being carried by another four people are supporting the top two poles that are being carried. And that's how these grapes were carried. So it was 8 Meraglim in total that carried the grapes. Ha Keitzad, what does this mean? Shmoina nasu eshkol echad. Nasu eshkol, that is. 8 of the Meraglim, since we know that there were 12 Meraglim. Right? So we have to understand exactly when it says in the pasuk that they carried back the fruits, who carried what? How were all Meraglim involved in carrying the fruits back from Eretz Yisrael? 8 of them carried the grapes. Echad nasa rimon. 1 carried a pomegranate. And and one of them carried a fig. They were massive. These were massive fruits. One of the Meraglim had to carry himself this massive pomegranate, and another one carried a teina. So the Gemara is assuming, and the Gemara is saying that for the Rimoin and the teina, each one carried along. But the grapes, it wasn't just one grape; it was an eshkoil of grapes. So for that, the remainder is 8 Meraglim that carry the grapes. Now there's another 2 that are still left, because there were 12 Meraglim. So now Yeshua, the Kalev le'nasuklum. Yeshua and Kalev did not carry any grapes along with them. Either the reason they didn't carry is because of their level of prominence. They were so chashiv, and therefore it wasn't for them to carry anything. Or another reason is because they were not involved in the plan and the idea that the Meraglim had. As Rashi here brings, when the Meraglim brought these fruits, they did not bring it with the intention to show how good Eretz Yisrael is. They actually brought it with the intention to show that just like the fruits that grow in Eretz Yisrael are unusually large and very different, so too Eretz Yisrael, B'chlal, the people that live there are also unusually mighty, and therefore it's going to be very difficult for us to conquer the land. So therefore, Yeshua and Kalev did not want to be involved in carrying these fruits from Eretz Yisrael. Okay, now just to go back a second over here, the cheshbon, just to mention, the cheshbon that it says over here, benegeh to turtini and turtini to turtini, first of all, it comes out that each one of the Meraglim is able to carry a weight of 120 sa'ah. So that means that these grapes that was carried by 8 Meraglim, 8 times 120 is 960. 960 sa'ah, that's the weight of how massive these grapes were that they carried. Massive, massive grapes. That's just a cheshbon. Now, exactly. Okay, so again, the turtini, it's not in the footage in the pasuk that there were 4 poles. In the pasuk it just says b'moit b'shnayim. But from the fact that we know that there had to have been 8 Meraglim that carried the grapes, so if you just have 2 poles, that just takes 4 people. So from that he explains that it must be that's another 2 poles that are supporting the top 2 poles. And that's the pshat over here in the Gemara. Just interesting, the exact pshat of exactly how the top 2 poles were positioned and the bottom 2 poles positioned. There are many, many pshatim and mefarshim about this. Yeah, over here I see in the art school they have different pictures for this. If you look over here on the side of the Gemara, the Taisus Shans has a picture for this. In Rashi, it says that the top two poles and the bottom two poles were placed diagonally across each other, right? So they were like an X shape that they were placed. But even in Rashi itself, there's different ways how to understand what Rashi means. I saw close to 15 different ways of describing exactly how these poles were positioned. It's very interesting how and even in the Yerushalmi, there's additional opinions about this. Okay, let's leave it at that. Let's go weiter. Now the Gemara comes back. Let me just mention again one more thing. Okay, there's a lot on this Gemara here. This thing over here, the Gemara says that Yeshua and Kalev did not take part of the carrying, right? So this is a big chiddush, and the Rebbe speaks about this in a Sicha Barichas and Chelik Lamed Ches and Parshas Shlach, because really they were commanded by Moshe Rabbeinu that you should bring back Mipri Haaretz. It was a mitzvah. How could they not do a mitzvah if because of their choshev? This is a very big chiddush. Gemara says Mishum dechshivi. Rashi al Torah does not bring this reason that they're choshev. Right, so you're gonna have to say because others were doing the mitzvah, so it wasn't mamash a mitzvah shebegufa that they had to do. Others were fulfilling the mitzvah already, so therefore they didn't have to do it, and they were choshev. But Rashi al Torah only brings the reason shelehoyu ba'isa eitza. That what was the point of the mitzvah? The point of the mitzvah was to show the goodness of the land. If over here the mitzvah is showing the opposite, so then the point of the mitzvah is not being fulfilled. So that's why they didn't carry. Okay, but the Rebbe speaks about this barichas, this idea that Yeshua and Kalev did not carry. Okay, now the Gemara goes back to what we said before, the machlokes regarding how tall the water of the Yarden rose when it stopped in its flow for Yidden to pass through. Pligi bar Rabami, Rabbi Yitzchak Nafche, so Rabami and Rabbi Yitzchak Nafche argued about this. Chad Omar, so one opinion is, L'devre Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that says that the water went how high? It went to 12 mil, the height of the length of how Yidden crossed through. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, Kechaniyasa Novru, Yidden crossed through in the way they camped, and therefore the water also rose to that very same level, that 12 mil. Now, you're going to have to say, I think Taisus over here points it out, that even though Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon asked the question that water flows quicker than a person walks through, so how did the water only rise to that level? So you're going to have to say, over here, because the water was flowing against its nature, it wasn't flowing downstream. If it flows downstream, it flows much quicker than a person walks. But over here, the water was flowing up against its nature, so therefore the water flowed at the same pace of them walking through. And you actually need some extra time as well, because don't forget the Gemara before said that Yeshua spoke to the Yidden in the Yarden, and they were placing the rocks in the Yarden, so the water had to be some time over here for all this to happen. Okay? And according to Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon, bezeh achazeh avru. They did not walk in the formation that they always camped, which would be 12 mil, but they walked in a much longer line because they were walking bezeh achazeh. The literal translation of zeh achazeh means in a single file line, one after the other. But that doesn't mamish mean in a single file line, because that would be very, very long. But it means that they were not in that same spread out formation that they were in the 12 mil when they were in the midbar. They were just walking one after the other, going through the Yarden. And therefore, according to Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon, the water rose 300 mil. But another opinion here is Beimar uBeimar. Both Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon agree that the Yidden passed through the Yarden the same way that they camped, 12 mil in that same formation. Mar Savar Odom Kal. But one opinion is that a person that walks through, he is walking quicker than the waters. Omar Savar Mayim Kalam. And the other opinion is, no, that the waters go quicker than the person. Yes, as I mentioned, that you can say that over here, that because the water is going against its regular flow, so therefore the people are able to walk quicker than this water that flows against its nature. Now the Gemara, this will be a long Gemara here, which will discuss the story of the Meraglim. Right, the next long piece over here, which the Gemara will discuss this. Since we brought up the Meraglim here, the Gemara starts from the beginning of the parsha of the Meraglim. So the pasuk begins, Shlach Lacha Anoshim. The Eibusha says, Shlach Lacha Anoshim, send men to go to Eretz Yisrael. What does this mean? Amar Reish Lakish says, Shlach Lacha. The Eibusha says, Lacha. Send for yourself. What does Lacha mean? Midai Tacha. This is your choice. This is your, if you want, then you send. Will this person choose a bad portion for himself? In other words, the Eibusha says, look, I promised you the land, and I promise you that it's a good land. And you can trust me. That it's not, I'm choosing you a good portion. But if you don't trust and you want to see it for yourself, you want to send Meraglim, so then it's your choice. You go ahead and send. The Hainu Dichsiv, and this is what the pasuk says: Vayitav be'enai hadavar. Parshas Dvarim. Moshe Rabbeinu describes what happened by the Meraglim. He says, "In my eyes, this was a good idea." What does it mean? Be'enai. Amar Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish says, "Be'enai v'loy be'einav shel makim." This was in my eyes that it was a good idea, but it wasn't in the Eibishter's eyes. This was not a good idea. There was no need to send Meraglim. There's also, the Rebbe speaks about this also by Arichas, this idea of shlach l'cha, why dafka l'cha, and the Rebbe explains the point basically is that the Eibishter, the whole point of sending the Meraglim to Eretz Yisrael was that Yidden should see it with their own eyes. Eibishter wanted Yidden shouldn't only enter into Eretz Yisrael with Kabbalah soil, but Yidden should appreciate and understand and connect to the goodness of the land and want to go into the land on their own. And therefore it says l'cha. The whole idea is l'daitacha, that the command to enter into Eretz Yisrael shouldn't just be Kabbalah soil, nase, but also nase v'nishma. That Yidden should understand it themselves, and that's why the actual sending was with the same approach, that Moshe Rabbeinu should decide on his own. And the idea of the sending the Meraglim was for that Yidden should agree and understand themselves that entering to Eretz Yisrael is geschmack and good. So Sich in Chelik Chav Gimel, the Rebbe speaks about this barichas. Then, over there in Parshas Devarim, it describes V'yachperu lanu sa'aretz. It simply means that they're going to go and spy the land and see the land. Amar Abchia bar Abbe, Meraglim lo niskavnu el l'boishta shel Eretz Yisrael. When the Meraglim went to Eretz Yisrael, their intention was to bring out to Yidden the negative, the embarrassment of Eretz Yisrael. How do we know? Because Ksiv Hacha v'yachperu lanu sa'aretz. It uses the term v'yachperu. Or Ksiv Hasam, there's another pasuk where it says v'chafra levana. The levana is embarrassed, the boisha achama, and the son is ashamed. So the word v'chafra means embarrassment. They wanted to express the embarrassment of Eretz Yisrael. That was their intention. Then the pasuk says, "Ve'elish moisam." These are the names of the Meraglim. Lamate Ruven, Shamur ben Zakur, Amar Rav Yitzchak, Dover Zeh, Mesairis, B'Yadeinu, Maviseinu. We have this tradition from our ancestors that Meraglim al Shem Aseim Nikru. The Meraglim, their names are all connected to their actions, their negative actions. Va'anu le'alsa b'yadeinu el echad. And we, in our hands, we only have one name that we could darshan. What is that? Susur ben Michal. What does this name mean? Susur means shesasar ma'asav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that he destroyed the Eibishter's actions. And Michal means she'asa atzmei mach, that he considered himself to be small. Or asa atzmei mach, go on the Eibishter, he made the Eibishter small. And asa atzmei mach, he made himself small, and therefore he came to. It goes on the Eibishter, right? Yeah, it goes on the Eibishter, correct? Yeah. Rashi says, "Asa." Rashi's greatest here in the Gemara, "Asa soinei shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu mach," but it means that they kaviyachal made the Eibishter weak. They said that the Eibishter doesn't have the power to help us conquer the land. On Rabbi Yechanan, on this Rabbi Yechanan says, "Af anu neymar." We as well kedash in another name of the Meraglim, and that is Nachbi ben Vavsi. What does this name mean? Nachbi means shehechbi dvar shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He concealed the Eibishter's words. And Vavsi means Shepisa al Midaisa Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He skipped over the Eibishter's midas, the Eibishter's attributes. Okay, so this Gemara here, this piece about the two names of the Meraglim, it's a long sikha from the Rebbe, in Chelik Yud Ches, where the Rebbe explains this Gemara with a tremendous ga'inus, unbelievable. Just one akudah that the Rebbe says there is, if you look in the Tanchuma, all the names of the Meraglim are darshaned. And in Drush, it's very easy to take the names of the Meraglim and darshan each one of them. Why does the Gemara only darshan one name or another name? So the Rebbe explains that we know the mistake of the Meraglim was that they did not want to go into Eretz Yisrael to the place of action. Right? They wanted to remain in the Midbar, which is to learn Torah, removed from the Maisa in Eretz Yisrael. So what the Gemara is saying is, the names of the Meraglim, it could all be darshaned for them, the mistake that they made, that they did not want action. What was their mistake? They didn't realize that in order for their level of Avodas Hashem in the Midbar to be complete, to be b'shleimus, you need Maisa mitzvahs as well. That was their mistake. But what the Gemara is saying over here is, Va'onu le'alsa b'yadenu ela echad. If we want to apply the lesson of the Meraglim for us, the point of the lesson is not regarding the shleimus of limudat Torah that requires action, but for us, the lesson of the Meraglim is regarding the action itself. That the action itself is the primary focus of a Yid's Aveda. That's the Ikar. And therefore we only have one lesson. And the lesson that we have to do things dafka in action. And the Rebbe learns, teaches over here, Sasa Maisa Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not clear in the Gemara what it means they destroyed the actions of the Eibishter. Which actions of the Eibishter did they destroy? It means that they destroyed the plan of the Eibishter, Olam HaMaaseh, to bring down godliness into the Olam HaMaaseh. And the same thing also regarding the Dibur and the Midas of the Eibishter, as it explains in Chassidus, that creation of the world comes from Dibur, and also from the Midas of the Eibishter. That's what the Meraglim destroyed. Okay, there's much more over there in the Sikha, a very big Arichas. The Rebbe explains this Inyan in Chelik Yud Ches. Weiter, the Gemara says, Vayalu ba-Negev. They went up to the Negev, Vayavayat Chevron, they came until Chevron. So it says Vayalu, they came up, and then it says Vayavay, singular term, and he came till Chevron. So Vayavayumi Bayale, it should have said that they came till Chevron. So Rave says, Melamed Shepirish Kolev Matzas Meraglim. Kolev separated himself from the plan of the Meraglim, and Vahalach, and he went, V'nishtateach al Kivri Ovis, and he went to daven by Maris HaMachpelah, by the Ovis. Amalehen, and he said to the Meraglim, Avaisai, Bikshu, or again, sorry, Amalehen, he said, he davened to the office, he said, Avaisai, Bikshu, Alai, Rachamim, beg mercy for me, She'anotzel me'atzas Meraglim. I should be saved from the plan of the Meraglim. Yeshua, which was also a tzaddik, and he was saved as well. He didn't go to Chevron because Kvar Bikish Moshe of Rachmim. Moshe already davened for him. Shenemar, Vayikra Moshe Lohisheya Binun Yehoshua. What's the change of name? Kol Yeshiyacha Matzas Meraglim. The Eibusha should save you from the plan of the Meraglim. Now behind the Chsiv, this is what the pasuk says: Ve'avdi Kolev. He had a different spirit with him when he went with the Meraglim, and then the pasuk over there says that because of this, he got a special inheritance over there in Eretz Yisrael. Okay, so over here on this Gemara is also a very obvious question, which the Rebbe discusses. If Moshe Rabbeinu is giving Yeshua a special bracha, he's changing his name and he's davening for him, so how is Moshe Rabbeinu sending the Meraglim? If he already sees at that point that they had this plan to do something negative. So the Rebbe's diak in the Gemara is, Kol Yeshiyacha me'atzas Meraglim. It doesn't say from the Aveda of the Meraglim. At that point, they did not have any bad intentions. They just deviated a little bit from what Moshe Rabbeinu told them. Moshe Rabbeinu said, you should go and tour the land and give a report of what you see. They decided that they're going to go as spies, Meraglim. Moshe Rabbeinu did not tell them to be Meraglim. And so Moshe Rabbeinu saw that they're devising a certain plan to deviate from what he told them. So therefore he davened for Yeshua that he should not deviate from the shlichus. But it wasn't enough of a reason to be mevatel the whole shlichus. They were still tremendous tzaddikim at that point. So therefore it makes sense that he's on one hand sending them, but at the same time he's davening for Yeshua. When they come to Eretz Yisrael, the pasuk says, "V'sham Achiman Sheishai v'Talmai v'Goymer." They see these great giants there. Achiman, what does this name mean? Miyuman Sheba'achiv. He's the right, in other words, the strong one amongst all his brothers. Sheishai means Shemeisem Esa'aretz Keshichasais. He creates in the earth these piles of or actually Keshichasais means actually ditches, like ditches in the ground. Wherever he walked, he was so tall and so heavy that he created these ditches in the ground. Talmai means shemesim esaretz tlomim, that wherever he walked there was these piles of sand from him walking there. Davar acher, another pshat is Achimon Bana Onas. Achimon, he built a whole city, Onas. Sheishai Bana Olash, he built a city Olash. And Talmai Bana Talbush. Then it says Yilidei Ha-Anak, the children of the giants. What does Anak mean? Shemanikin Chama B'Kaimosan. They're so tall that it looks like they block the light of the sun, and it looks like the sun becomes like a necklace around their neck. And it says they came to the city of Chevron. Chevron, Sheva Shanim Nivnisa, 7 years, the pasuk there says it was built 7 years before Mitzrayim. My Nivnisa. What does it mean that Chevron was built 7 years before Mitzrayim? If you'll say Nivnisa Mamish, that it was literally built 7 years before Mitzrayim, how could that be? Efshir, is it possible? Adam Baina Bayis Levnei Cotton. A person builds a home for his younger son. Kaidem Levnei Gadol, before he builds a home for his older son. So what does this mean? The Chsiv, the pasuk says, B'nei Cham, who are the children of Cham? Cush. Then Mitzrayim, the Gaimer, the continuation of the pasuk there says, is Ufut, Canaan. So Canaan is the youngest son, and Mitzrayim is the second son. So Cham should have built Mitzrayim, which is the second son, before he built Chevron, which is in Canaan, for his younger son. So how could you say that he built 7 years before he already built for Mitzrayim? He already built that his Chevron for Canaan. Elo, rather what it means is, doesn't mean that it was built before, but it means it was a better quality of a place, 7 times better than Tzayin in Mitzrayim. And now the Gemara explains what this means. There's no area in Eretz Yisrael where the land is bad quality more than Chevron. The Kavri Bashikvi, and therefore it's a place designated to bury the dead in this area because you can't plant, it's not good soil there. And you don't have a better quality of a land, of soil, than Eretz Mitzrayim. The garden of Hashem is Eretz Mitzrayim. And in Eretz Mitzrayim itself, in Mitzrayim itself, you don't have a place that's better quality, better soil than Mitzrayim itself. In Tzayan is the place where the ministers lived over there. So Tzayan is the best place in Mitzrayim. Chevron in Eretz Yisrael is the worst quality of land to plant there. But nevertheless, but Chevron is better quality, 7 times better than Tzayan, which is the best of Mitzrayim. So that's what the pasuk means, that it was built. It doesn't mean 7 years before. It means that it was 7 times better than the best place in Mitzrayim. But the Gemara asks on this: is it true that Chevron is such a bad quality of a territory in Eretz Yisrael? But Vaksiv, the pasuk says, "Vayim Ketzer Boim Shana." It was the end of 40 years. Vayim Avshalom al Melech. Avshalom tells his father David HaMelech, El Chanav Gomer, I'm going to go over there to Chevron, and he tells his father, there in Chevron, I'm going to bring karbanis that I donated to the Eibishter. So he's going to Chevron to bring his karbanis, and V'amar Av Ivye V'yitei Rabbi Bar Bachanon Shahalach Lahavi Kvasim Chevron. He went to bring the best sheep, the fattest and best sheep he found where? In Chevron. So I see that Chevron is the best place. The Tanya will learn in Abraisa, Elim Mimayav. If you want to get the best rams to bring for Karbanis, you take them from Mayav. And Kvasim, the best sheep, come from where? Chevron, from Chevron. So how can we say that Chevron is a bad quality of an area, of a territory, if we see that Avshalom brings his best and fattest animals and sheep from there? So the Gemara answers, on the contrary, Mina. From here, from this itself, I see that the soil to plant over there in Chevron is the worst. Because I did the Klisha Ada, because the land, the earth itself is very bad quality, so of the Raya, so you can't plant there, so it's made a place for the animals to pasture there. And Vishaman Kinyana, and therefore this is a place where the sheep that are there are very fat, they're very good. And Rashi explains, Adarabah, the drier the land is, the better it is for the sheep. If it's a place that's too moist, so then it's hard for them to walk there. If it's too wet and too moist, it's a place that's drier and it's the worst quality of land, that's the place where you have all the sheep over there. And nevertheless, it was better, 7 times better than the best place in Mitzrayim, Tzayan.